Hey, it's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, and self publisher. I share my creative process here with you online. If you would like to get additional bonus live streams twice a month, be able to read my comic books in an online digital archive, get access to a Patreon exclusive Discord server where we share artwork, feedback, talk process, and more, you become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI. If you would like to get a free digital sketchbook, get work in progress animated GIFs delivered right to your inbox, get blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively, you can sign up for my free monthly newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books or read digitally on Comixology or Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That'll forward you to my Amazon author page. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. It is a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. Or my most recent project, Morning Star, tells the story of Lucifer's fall from heaven as a Western. It's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains the conclusion, issues 5 through 8. Both volumes have extensive back matter, thumbnails, page layouts, character design, script excerpts, and more. Photo reference. I pretty much show you how I put the whole book together. You can check out all of that at amazon.jeremy.net. And if you're watching on YouTube, on the YouTube homepage, there are book flip-throughs of each of those books. You can check out what is inside. All right. So I have been having some minor technical difficulties this morning. So, whoops. Hang on here. Yeah, here we go. No, let's go with this. All right. So, for some reason, the screen sharing quit on me early on, and I've got it going again. But if it drops out, I don't know. I'll do my best to figure out a way to get it back on again. We'll see what happens. Anyway, this is the progress that I have made with the Medusa piece. The red that's here is because I had a hard time visualizing how the underbelly was going to move on this snake. This particular tall one in the middle. So, I do what I usually do. If I've got a problem, I try to come up with a creative solution. And for me, that solution is just doing cross contours to kind of map the path that it's making. So I kind of want it slithering away from us, but then have the snake turn around as it comes up near the top. So look at this. It's a little bit clearer. I'm just going to drop the opacity on that and then just put it, really is probably not going to need that much underbelly. Unless I want to do it where the underbelly itself is the part that's facing us. And then maybe have that turn. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. We'll see. But also, I realized I've been working on this piece for quite a while. And a lot of that is that for the past few months, the only time I've actually been working on illustrations is on these live streams. During the week, I might spend a little bit of time working on it, but more often than not, I've been taking some online art courses at on Schoolism. So the amount of work that I'm actually completing has definitely dropped. My output, my pace has dropped significantly. And I do worry about the fact that, not worry, but I do want these live streams to be interesting for you guys and entertaining. It's one thing for me working on a long comic book over the course of a year, but when it's a couple of months on a single illustration, I do want to try and keep things interesting, not just for me, but for you guys as viewers. So it may mean that I might have to try speeding up my process. And what's funny is, even though I'm talking about speeding up, one of the things that I am very seriously thinking about doing is this piece is a reinterpretation of a sketch that I did, a piece of original art. And I've been thinking about the fact that while I'm cleaning this up and making this a better version of that original piece, I grabbed a copy of the original and wanted to see what happens if I do a draw over of that exact original, because I changed a lot on this piece. I basically just said, what if I were going to do the original illustration from scratch? And that's the approach I took with this. But I am curious what it would look like if I were to take that original piece and not try to do it from scratch, but try to do it from, what am I trying to say here? Just try to do corrections, doing a draw over, correcting it, fixing it, making adjustments. But in the meanwhile, let's just see how we go with this thing here. So I'm probably going to try a few different versions. Let's see how this looks if I move that out there. I'm actually destroying too much of the curves. I should keep this very curvy to continue that sense of the volume. And I had this leave off here a little bit because I want to give a little bit of a sense of a turn. Not a turn, but just that you see a little bit of the side as opposed to the underbelly. And I don't like how it came out, so I'm just going to come back here and finish those lines. I need to fix these two because the curves are too extreme, because this is an area where it's transitioning from coming towards the viewer to turning away from the viewer. It's sort of the arc that's bending. I'm kind of like right in the middle of that arc right here. And this phase is kind of the most challenging phase for me. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel like it's the most challenging phase for a lot of artists. That phase where you're just doing all of the little details to bring a piece to the end. Because it requires attention to detail, but at the same time, you're not doing anything new and exciting to the piece. So it's kind of like you need that focus to just keep staying on task. Which I don't think is particularly easy. Let's see here. Turn that off. That's not bad. I'm also running out of layers on this piece because this is a particularly large. It's like a 16 by 20. Let's see. Gary Hodges in the chat. Hey, Gary, how you doing? It's listening while working. Not always nice to have company at the drawing table. Nice to have you. If you guys have not listened, had a great episode with Gary last week. Go back and listen to that. You hear more of us having a deep creative process talk. One of my favorite things to do while making art. All right. I would say that this fact of going through here and doing alternate versions of the same piece is probably one of the things that has slowed me down the most creatively, but it has led to me producing better work. The fact that I will make a piece, get it pretty far along, and then say, hey, let me really see what this looks like if I take a different path. And it's also something that I learned from studying the old masters. Like right now, I'm reading a book, not reading a book because it's an art book on John Singer Sargent. And John Singer Sargent and Peter Paul Rubens, two artists whose art books I read and learned a lot from. You know, they show paintings where they did multiple versions of the same painting. They might do 2 or 3 paintings, and that's in addition to doing oil sketches and oil studies for composition. But they might actually do more than one finished version of the same piece. And you know, that's something that I think a lot of times we think about we're looking at a painting that's done, and we're like, maybe I should have done this, maybe I should have done that. We think about all those other alternate blind alleys we could have taken. And it didn't really occur to me as a really valid creative option to say, take all the blind alleys. Just make a finished version of each of the I mean, it's one thing to make minor changes, which with digital, that's very easy to do. It's another thing to say, I'm going to actively make a completely different version of the same piece, either in terms of style, in terms of coloring, in terms of lighting. Like the basic sketch might be the same, but the finished surface of the piece might be dramatically different. And I never really took that as a serious work in progress until now. And I don't think it's a progress I'm going to stay with forever. Pardon me, I have to blow my nose. Every time the temperature goes up or down, my allergies kick in. What I was going to say is that I don't think that this is necessarily a process that I'm going to do forever, in the sense that I'm going to do like 5 or more different versions of the same piece. But I might still do 1 or 2 different versions. But what I do believe that this phase of indulging in drawing multiple versions of one piece, I think that what it'll do is it'll help me focus in on what is and is not working on a particular illustration at any given time. And I think maybe going into these indulgences of really, you know, experimenting and redoing the piece or trying from different angles. Because one of the things I'm also interested in doing is drawing this and intentionally drawing a version as quickly as possible. Because this is a piece that I've labored over for a few weeks now. At least a month I've been working on this. I mean, you guys know better than I do watching the live stream how many videos I've done where I'm working on this one piece. But I was doing sketches, had reference. I mean, I still got my reference in this file. I've got like 2 different stacks of reference in this same file to look at while I'm drawing. And I just move it around to put it next to the thing that I want. So this piece is kind of a collage of multiple different images that I'm looking at while I'm drawing. Nope, let's turn that off. I mean, hell, I'm also still even thinking about the fact of what happens if I do a version of this where I do it, you know, without hard ink lines and do the entire thing just tonally. So it's more like a painting. And this whole approach that I even did of working out the shadows and the lights and the silhouette before going into any line work is very different from how I normally work. And I know that leads to the question, well, it's like, well, why are you changing your process so much when it, you know, that's got to be slowing you down? And that's true, it does. But I'm not just drawing to make the finished piece. I'm also drawing to learn and improve my craft. And if doing these variations helps me with that, then it's worth it. It's like, well, I used to run track and field in college. And, you may not enjoy running a quarter mile. And when you have to run a quarter mile at the end of practice or at the start of practice, you're like, this sucks. Why are we doing this? This is so much longer and so much harder than what I'm going to be doing. Because, I was a hurdler. I did the 110-meter high hurdles. And you might come along and say, all right, this really sucks. I hate doing this. I would much rather just focus on what I need to do for competition. But what happens is when you train, and that's what I look at this as. I look at the variations, me doing experimentation as a form of training. I learn how to get better so that maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I'm producing artwork that's at a much higher level. And that's not to say that there aren't two different paths to the same road, because I could just have my technique perfectly down, do nothing but practice that technique and focus on getting faster and faster and faster. And then once I'm a super fast artist, then I start saying, oh, well, I'm fast, but what happens if I change my process like this a little bit? What happens if I change my process like that a little bit? And let the speed guide me to being so good at my process that I can start tweaking it, versus tweaking my process and slowly getting faster. Truth is, I probably would be better off just focusing on speed and limiting the experiments. But I'm also an innately curious person. And, I don't, obviously, I'm making artwork and sharing it with you guys online. So I don't believe in making artwork in a vacuum just for myself. Hi, hey, see Byron in the chat. Says good day to all. Good day to you, Byron. Scorpy's here. Hey, how you doing, Scorpy? Thanks for dropping in. Putting some finishing touches on the snakes on a main piece. And I see Amar. How you doing, Amar? Good to see you as always. But what was I gonna say? Process, yeah. I am an innately curious person. And while I'm sharing stuff for you guys to a certain degree, I also am making artwork for myself. And the part that's the for myself part is the part that wants to play with style, play with technique, experiment with different things, go down blind alleys. Like, I'm the type of kid who, if I was playing the video game Final Fantasy, like the original old school Final Fantasy on Nintendo, I'm that kid that would walk every square inch of every map, trying to find all of the different creatures, trying to search every corner of a cave to figure out where all of the treasure is, drawing my own maps of the dungeons in the games. That's the type of kid I was. And I kind of treat art the same way, in this methodical, ongoing quest to just suck in as much as possible. And I acknowledge that while it might not be the most productive and the most healthy way to go about it, I find it incredibly interesting. Continuing to both improve my craft and discover new things about the art making process is like one of the funnest things for me. It's what keeps me like, honestly, just the idea of sitting down at the drawing table and saying, all right, I'm going to experiment with this technique today, or starting a new piece in a different process. Those things like excite me no end. Now, looking at this, I'm just thinking that the line that's dividing. Amar says, you're going to have the horse yell in Samuel's voice, get these mother effing snakes off my mother effing maid. That'll have to be a variant. I'll just make the horse, like, put Sam's face, Sam Jackson as a horse. You know, and I'll tell you another interesting thing is you might think for all of the sketching and detail that I do that I have like every step of this planned out. But honestly, really, even up to, you know, I didn't draw the detail of the snake, like all of the scales and the snake heads. I didn't draw that on a separate layer, even though it probably would have been wise, would have been easier for me to go back in and change stuff. But when I just had the silhouette plus the black outline of the silhouettes drawn, I didn't know if this piece was going to work. I didn't know how this was going to come out. I might have gotten to the end and said, oh my God, I wasted all this time. I spent like weeks on a piece that doesn't work. Now that I'm getting here, and I will tell you that one of the things I was going to do, I don't know if I have the brush here. No, I do. I'll wait till I'm done here. I have that snake brush that I made for the last Medusa painting, and I was going to try and brush in scales on the back part. But I honestly don't think this piece even needs it. However, the larger point was that I really didn't know if this piece was going to work. I really thought, hey, this might end up really being a sucky waste of time. And it really is only like in the past 24 hours of working on it, because I worked on it for a few hours yesterday. It was really only at that point that I said, okay, this piece is coming together. It does look like it's working as an illustration. But also another thing that I said to myself is whether it works or not, I need to just sit back and trust the process. The trust the process doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to come up with a great piece, but it does mean that nitpicking the process, you can worry yourself out of a good piece. You can have something that's on the road to being a good piece and keep second guessing yourself and keep changing it. And to me, that's another reason why knowing that I can just make a completely new version of a piece is appealing to me, is because it stops me from that kind of second guessing. I mean, the second guessing can simply be, all right, I'm just going to do this again. But a little voice in my head that was worried about how well this was going to turn out. Because, you know, I think that sometimes because of the fact that I'm drawing in front of you guys and I'm willing to make mistakes, that I might give the appearance that I don't worry about how well a piece is going to do. If I didn't worry, then why would I spend so much time doing thumbnails? Why would I spend so much time doing reference? Obviously, I worry about whether a piece is going to come out well or not. I think I've let myself be willing to embarrass myself publicly with a piece that really just tanked it, but I still worry about those things. I worry about all the same things that you guys do. But that's why, even the same way that, and this is a reason why I kind of encourage everyone not to get down on their own artwork. Let's see. I see King Kaiser in the chat. Hey, King, how you doing? Thanks for dropping in. He says, that's so cool. Thank you. I greatly appreciate it. Zoom out so you guys get a larger look. Yeah, this guy, well, I will tell you that while I say that I'm in the home stretch, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make this the horse is going to stay white. I'm going to make it an albino snake. So I'm going to color all of the eyes red and all of the underbelly is going to be red. All the underbellies of the snakes. We'll see how that splash of red works with the piece, because I feel like it's going to be kind of striking. Amar, it's like, Or I could have the horse say in Terrence Howard's voice, "It's hard out here for a pimp with these snakes in the mane." Yeah, he says, as Rakim would say, "Don't sweat the technique." Very true, very true. Truth. Dropping truth bombs over there. I'm gonna have to zoom out because okay, gross, too much information, but I actually, in talking, I spit on my screen, so I gotta wipe that off. I don't share that to be gross. I share that to be human. It's like, hey, sometimes you get talking, gums get flapping, little flex. Anyway, I always try to encourage people not to get too down on themselves or beat up themselves about their artwork. And sometimes I need that voice for myself. So when I say that I was working on this and a little voice in my head said, "Trust the process, just keep working on it," that was me doing for myself what I try to do for other artists, in just saying, hey, make the thing, know that it's not going to be perfect, and learn from it. But don't get too obsessive about it. Just keep going, keep going. I need that voice as well. So sometimes Jeremy turns to Jeremy and says, "Hey, man, guess what? If you botch this piece, it's going to be okay. You can make another one. And if you don't botch it, it comes out good, it's okay. You can still make another one. If you make it, it comes out brilliant, don't get cocky." In fact, that's a good thing to think about. Maybe it's the fact that artists try to, I don't know, underplay their value or underplay their own worth. But a lot of times I try to think that if something comes out well, it's not me, it's the process. And if I follow the process, then it'll give me some sort of results. Which is also nice, because that means that if it sucks, you can also blame the process. Say, "Hey, it wasn't me. I tried the process, didn't work." Oh. All right. I think the only problem I'm having here is that in tweaking these lines, I made them a little thicker than I want to be. So I'm actually going to go through. What I should have done was just erase and redraw the whole line again so it has a consistent thickness. These lines in the underbelly. And this is why I should have drawn. Oh, wait. I did draw these on a separate layer. I was going to say the entire outline of the snake I should have drawn on a separate layer. The black line silhouette I should have drawn on a separate layer from the details. But as I come in here, I'm like, oh, wait, I did do that. All right, no, that one's fine. So there's a couple in here that just are uneven. Like they're thicker than some of the other ones, and I want to just give them sort of more of an evenness. Which is funny because I actually have a brush that I created specifically to draw the underbelly of a snake. Amar says you should put a Medusa or Lucifer on the horse as a variant. That is a good idea. I'd have to find a way to pose them so that they don't interfere. The figure doesn't interfere with the snake horse, with the snake head. I think the variant would have to be like maybe put all of the snakes, like, where's a blank layer? Like I would probably have to do something where I put all of the snakes on one side going behind it so that it wouldn't interfere with the figure. Because otherwise the figure is going to be covered by snakes anyway if someone's riding it. which is another interesting alternative, another interesting possibility. Anyway, just get rid of that. Amar says, "Don't make those promises you can't keep." That's true. I've been making all kinds of promises, and I'm like, I ain't gonna do that shit. Ooh, that's a nice suggestion. He says, in a God pose, or similar to like Death Dealer by Frazetta. You know, that's a funny thing. That would be the second time I used Death Dealer as an inspiration. The cover to issue 5 of Morningstar has Gabriella, one of the archangels, sitting on top of a horse. Basically, it's kind of an homage to the Death Dealer piece. All right. So here we go. So we've got 2 different versions. Let me turn that off. All right. Go back to black. So we have these 2 different, this snake here in the middle. I've got this version, which I consider version A. And then I've got this version, which I consider version B. And I will tell you that unless you guys were screaming that version B is the better one, I am really inclined to go with version A, which is this. This feels right to me. Oh, and Amar mentioned he's liking the process he's doing for a new series he's working on. Yeah, I really like watching how you were building out the silhouettes. And I don't know if it's just from me getting a better sense of using silhouettes myself from the classes I'm using, but I never really understood it's not that I didn't understand the silhouette process. I've seen people do it. I understand the technical aspects, but it never really worked well for me. And I see now, like in recent, you know, in recent years, in recent months of trying this process, I've seen it. I've seen you do it. I've seen people from the schools and program doing it, and I'm like, okay, that works a lot better than I expected. Like it's working for me. I feel it. All right, let me merge those 2 layers. I'm going to get rid of that sketch there. All right, now just as a experiment for some fun here, for giggles and shits, let me grab my my snake brushes. Where are those? Oh, scales. I've got a whole set of okay. So here's my underbelly brush. So this is a oh wow, too small. Oh, too big. Very Goldilocks. Oh, I get it. This brush isn't scaled for this for a canvas this large. That's the problem. This works better on kind of a screen size brush. So let me actually go in here and duplicate and rename this screen size or underbelly large. Now, the scale. brush size. Let's just say 400. You know what? I could sit down and mess with that brush. I already didn't look at this. I'm like, I'm falling down that brush rabbit hole where I'm like trying to tweak and mess with stuff. I don't need that right now. Let me take a look and see how the scales look. But other than that, I think I'm just going to move on into color. I'm really just curious how these look. Oh, that's what I need to do. I need to change the color to match the shadow color. So the interesting thing about this brush is if I go this way, the scales are pointing behind. If I go this way, right. Yeah, this does not look great. Where's the brush I have that has a group of scales? Here we go. Yeah, none of these is really working for me. They worked for a large painting. And I think when I've just got like a mass of scales, then it does actually work pretty well. But for, you know what? And I'll tell you that gray isn't even working. Let's go back to black. Even this is black, it doesn't seem to be working. All right. I'm not going to mess with those anymore. I'm just going to move on with the piece. They work much better when I was working on a screen-sized illustration. But for this, they're not really coming together. Let's see here. Yeah, Amar mentions I'm behind a bit, but should be wrapping up the erroneous characters similar to the effeminate character. He says you were a slight motive for that, even in the cartoon and comics. Happy to hear that I'm a motive for anything, or motivate for anything. Let's see, yeah, I know characters by their silhouette. I may not hit it for all characters, but I think it'd be cool if I can do it. You know, I definitely have not done that. I tried to do a piece for Morningstar where I put all the characters in kind of a team shot and work out the silhouette, and all I really achieved was just the fact that like having URL being the biggest one, kind of standing in the background like the Hulk, and then the fact that you could tell Michael by having his afro kind of peeking out underneath his bowler hat. Those were the only two. Well, Lucifer and his dreads, they're recognizable, but in the piece, the way it was drawn out, they didn't really read in the silhouette. So, but then again, that was the piece that I'm talking about. I drew a very, very long time ago. I think that I could achieve it better now. Yeah, and Amar says the most interesting thing is building the Pinterest and Puref mood board for the characters. Yeah, that's like for me, one of the things that I got out of the schoolism class was for a while I would have my reference in a split screen on because you can split screen on the iPad, and I could have on the left side, I could just bring up my photos and be looking at reference in there. But for some reason I found like actually just dropping the reference So these blocks of images are images that were in my original rough version, my smaller layout drawing, and I just copied these over. I copied these over and flattened them and put them in the large file because I've got fewer layers in this larger image. So I had to just flatten the reference instead of having them in multiple pieces. But seeing how many different snakes I've got in here, I needed a lot of different reference for it. And I feel like I want to go in and this snake, where's back to my regular brush. This snake right here, I feel like his head is a little too lumpy, and I kind of want to shave his head down a little bit. So that's like one of the last things I'm going to do before I switch to doing some color work. Yeah, the head just feels a little bit too large. And actually, let me turn on or turn off. I just want to make sure I can see where the snake's head begins and ends. Because if I erase too much, I get this, where I'm digging into the underside of his head. What I really want to do is just move the thickness of his outline inward more. Yeah, that's all. Just bring this in a bit. There we go. And the other thing that I am thinking about is changing the color of the shadow. Oh, there's two things: changing the color of the shadow, and then also possibly changing the color of the line art. So at this point, I'm just kind of playing with it. I feel like this is 90% done. 90% done. Hey, Khaleesi. Khaleesi's down here meowing. I gotta pull her cat condo next to the drawing table so that she can come up here and see what I'm doing. Because she is the art director. All right. Still got that blank layer that I had on for experiments. Let me make sure there's nothing in there. No biggie. Hold up. All right. Moving stuff around. Letting the girl climb up on the condo right next to the drawing table. All right. Hopefully that will keep her busy. Let's see here. Amar said he's been watching videos on unknown martial arts style. Says it's quite interesting. Instead of using chi, it's using the ancestors' powers for his characters. That's kind of cool. Nice way to create a fulfilling, enriching mythology. It says the thing I'm on the fence about is tribal tattoos, scarring, and overly detailed costumes. Well, I know that, pardon me, given the fact that you're also working on animation as well, definitely detailed costumes and scarification can will slow down that animation process. So that's one thing to consider is just whether you're going to want to animate and draw all of that. You know what you could do, really, if you want to figure out how much detail you want to do. I've seen you doing animation tests. Maybe what you do is you just take one costume, do a detailed version, do like your dream version of it, and then do your okay, I can't do your dream version of it with all the detail you want, and then do your Bruce Timm super stripped down version, and do like maybe a 5 second, 10 second animation of it moving, or maybe just draw one comic book page of that character doing a bunch of actions, and see which one you're sick of. Because who knows, if you find that the detailed one works for you and it doesn't slow you down that much, then maybe you do it with all of the detail. I mean, I'm always of the mindset of yeah, it's probably wiser to keep the detail to a minimum. Says the man who's drawing pieces with like tons of snakes. But even this, the fact that I decided not to go in and draw all of the different scales. Let's see here. I do need to check something. Somewhere I grabbed reference of a red snake or an albino snake, and I can't seem to find it. Let's see here. Yeah, Amar followed up the because the scarring and tattoos are so cool from different areas of the world. I think that I think they look really really cool too. It's just a matter of finding what works best with your workflow. And who knows? Maybe what you can do is you can look at taking that, trying to create a simplified version of the idea that you have, the scarification, like trying to take something that's very complicated and seeing if you can make a simplified version of it. All right. So trigger warning for people who don't like snakes. I'm about to bring a bunch of images of snakes up on the screen. All right. I think this is the main one I need. Let's just copy. Paste. And now I need to blow this up really big so I can get a good look at his head. just need to look at some reference while I draw. So I think what actually might work better is if I have the black go all the way around. You know, this is kind of one of the nice things about working digital is I can just kind of. I thought about going in and redrawing the actual eye inside because if I turn this off, you can see that I didn't really position. Like I put the glint in the eye lower. I guess I don't know if I was thinking about reflected light or what, but I don't want to scale that up. I just want to adjust the position. But what I can do instead is just draw it like this. And then put some black around it. A little bit of cleanup. And now I can just decide if I need to refine this shape or not. As opposed to going in and tweaking the inks underneath. Let's see here. Amar says the simplification without the scales makes it easy to read visually and makes it look more stylized. He says if I had a home, I would get a pet snake or a lizard. I have a cousin that has a pet snake. If she still has him, he's probably big now. Well, you know what's funny? As a child, I was terrified of snakes. And I'm one of those weird people who I don't like being controlled by my fears. So, I mean, I don't think that's that weird. I think most people don't like being controlled by their fears. But I had a neighbor that had a boa constrictor, and I intentionally made myself go over to his house, hold his snake, um, and it was just a manner for me to confront my fears. And since then, I have held snakes before. Um, they're not my favorite animal, but at least I've proven to myself that I can control how I feel around them. And to be honest, I do think that small snakes are cute. When you get to like the 4 foot, 8 foot, 10 foot like boa constrictors that people have in their homes, I'm like, not for me. But for smaller serpents, I'm completely down with that. And you know what? I know that I could go in here and select different darker shades, but I'm going to be lazy about this and hopefully it won't bite me in the ass. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop the opacity and give this volume with black. And by give this volume, I mean I'm going to go in here with a low opacity brush and just darken the edges to make it feel a little bit rounder. I probably should make it a little bit darker at the bottom. A little bit brighter towards the top. So it feels like we're kind of looking. I guess what I'm trying to express is that I want it to feel like it's getting more light in the upper left hand side. A little bit of that. Let's see here. Amar says, I would rather have a snake versus a pet spider like a tarantula. Well, shit, I'd rather just have two cats, which is what we have. I'm good on that. Um, Although when it does come to exotic pets, I do really like bearded dragons. I mean, for me, I just when it comes to reptiles that I do think are cute, I lean more towards lizards than I do snakes and or spiders. Where's that layer with the reference? So the highlight in the eye is almost as bright as the skin itself, but given that this eye is on the shadow side, in fact, I almost feel like I should darken this eye a little bit more. Yeah, let's see what happens if I go just a little bit darker, just to give it that sense of now giving it an overall. So now I've already done that rounding, that modeling to create form. Now I'm just going to add some shadow to be on the darker shadow side of the horse's eye. So the highlight that's going to have is going to be significantly darker as well. Um, Now this is where things get tricky because I want that highlight to have some red, but I also want it to be a brighter color. So I'm going to start with the original red that I was using. And let's push it, instead of pushing it to the white that the other one had, I'm just going to push it a little bit higher. There is a glint, a reflection in it, but it's not going to be as bright as it would be on the other side. So let's see how this looks. Just a little. Because that's the thing I wanted, was to give the horse albino snake eyes. Because when you look at a horse, you just think of a white horse as, ooh, it's a white horse. But when you have a horse with a bunch of albino snakes for the mane, I feel like it kind of pulls the whole theme together in a creepier way. And as you know, I likes to make people feel uncomfortable. I don't know why. Actually, no, I know exactly why. It's because I've spent much of my life, like, okay, deep childhood memories. As a kid, I was afraid of everything. Didn't like scary movies. A commercial for Friday the 13th came on. I would physically get up and leave the room if a commercial came on for a scary movie. Or I would have to do that thing where you cover your ears and go, yeah, like I would have to do that until I thought the commercial was open. And God forbid I opened my eyes and the commercial wasn't over yet, which made watching TV in the family room during like family time really irritating for us, my family. So they were like, just shut up, baby. Slept with the light on until about, I want to say 5th grade, 6th grade. So like 11 years old, maybe 12, sleeping with the lights on. I was just a terrified child. And then somewhere in there, I want to say around the time that Lost Boys came out, because Lost Boys was the first thing that made me genuinely curious about horror. And it was also at the age where it wasn't that I stopped being afraid. It's that I realized that that my fear was controlling me, and I just, something in me shifted. And I just changed from someone who was afraid to someone who did not like being afraid and did not want to be controlled by their fear. And then I think I watched Lost Boys, and then I watched the Stephen King made for TV movie Salem's Lot, and from there I actively started trying to investigate horror and figure out what it was that freaked me out about things. And where that ties into me making work that is creepy is that I try to find the beauty in horror, and I try to find the horror in things that are beautiful. Um, that's part of my way of processing my own personal journey from being somebody who was afraid of the world to just, I don't know, being fascinated by the weird and the bizarre and the dark. I mean, I'm not somebody who has like a collection of occult books and like animal skulls and all sorts of weird stuff. It's not like I've got a collection of Fangoria magazines. In fact, Fangoria magazine was another thing that like I could not walk past a Fangoria magazine on the newsstand. And I don't know if you guys remember the old Steven Spielberg anthology TV show, Amazing Stories, the original version, not the remake. They had that episode where the guy had this formula that can make anything in a magazine um, come to life, be real. And I remember at the end, they've got the magazine is dripping on an issue of Fangoria. And I remember that, like, I loved that episode. And then you get to the Fangoria part, and it's like my blood just ran cold because that was like my full on nightmare. Having something in a scary magazine coming to life. I keep going back and forth between how close to white versus desaturated I want this to be. Part of me says I should just screw it and make it white. So the thing with this snake head is that it's almost as white as the snake's skin, but the snake's skin is even off white. Where's that other albino snake head? Let me bring in, when in doubt, more reference. Add, insert a photo. Let's take a look at this guy. I guess I can just go full on white. Let's see here. So we're pretty much at an hour. And like I said, I've made, I think, a lot of progress on this particular piece, but that progress has been made mostly in terms of spending some time focusing on this piece yesterday and getting it pretty far along today. What I really mean to say is just that I, spent a lot of time working on it yesterday so that today's progress seems more significant, because now it really is just polishing this. So the next step, really all I need to do to finish this off is what I just did here with the horse's eyes, I need to do with the rest of the snakes. I want to make the inside of the horse's mouth red, like the way you would have, like the way the albino snake has a red inside of its mouth, just to make it feel extra creepier. And I think this piece is done. Oh wait, I have to actually make the snakes on a main logo for the shirt. So I'll do one with the logo, I think one without the logo. And then also, I think I might make a print of this as well. And for the print, I'm gonna have to decide what I want the background to be. I mean, the background might just be a bunch of snake scales. Don't know. All right, let's see here. when we were talking about snakes and spiders and other things, Amar says, I could not live in Australia. It says, I always see those videos that were like those bird Easter I guess Easter egg sized spiders. Like, yeah, those are freaky. Let's see here. Amar says, I loved scary movies even as a kid. I slept with the light on, and I have a few childhood memories that I think would be great horror movies. I used to have sleep paralysis, and it's happened less and less as an adult. It still happens, maybe, it doesn't even happen once a year now. It's like every couple of years, all the time, where I am in a half dream state. I'm conscious, but I can't move. And usually you think that something is standing over you when you have sleep paralysis. I don't know why that always seems to be the case, but there's a whole documentary about it that's supposed to be really trippy. Chet Zar mentions it on his on his Dark Art Society podcast, which if you guys haven't checked out, is a great podcast, and it's on YouTube now. So, and yes, Amar says, speaking of creepy, did you see the new Hellraiser trailer? He says they're sticking more closely to the source material for this version of Pinhead. Although I noticed that, is it just me or is Pinhead a woman now? I thought that was a female Pinhead. And he says, looks interesting. I'm hoping it's better than the last 2 or 3 without Doug Bradley. Honestly, I've only seen 3 Hellraiser movies. I've seen the first one, which was so incredibly gory, and I saw it probably, again, too young. Actually, no, I haven't seen. I think what I saw first was Hellraiser 2. Then I saw there's a Hellraiser where Pinhead doesn't show up till the end, but it's showing like 3 different stories of the Lamont configuration, the puzzle box, like in Victorian era or like in ancient Italy. Then there was some other time. Oh, I think it was like ancient Italy, modern day, and then in the future. So it showed it in like 3 different time periods. And in all of them, they end up summoning Pinhead. Or they end up summoning the Cenobites. I can't remember if Pinhead was in that one. I've seen one other one, but I think that there's a ton of Hellraiser movies that I haven't seen. Yeah, I have Hulu. The trailer's on Hulu. I'm probably gonna watch it. And it's interesting because I'm not a fan. Here's the thing: I like horror now, but I'm still not a fan of gore. Like for me, my favorite horror film, and a lot of people don't even think of it as a horror film, is Jacob's Ladder. Like I like horror films that are psychological, where it's really about like Jacob's Ladder is like really makes you feel what it would feel like to be losing your mind. I like creepy much more than I like gory. I'm not into necessarily gore. Now, that's not to say that I won't watch a movie with gore. Like I think the very first Hostel film. I haven't seen all of the Hostels, but I owned the first one on DVD because the story is that good and it's that well told. And it's an extremely gory movie, but the gore is in service of the plot. It's not just people getting their guts ripped out just for fun. It's literally, that's kind of the point of the film, is people's obsession with guts and gore and disturbing stuff. Well, torturing people. But generally speaking, I like stuff like a good David Cronenberg movie, which again, he's got some gory stuff in there, but like The Fly or Videodrome. Like I prefer stuff that is more psychological and creepy than it is just blood and guts. That's the kind of horror I like. Let's see. Amar says, I wanted to do a career prosthetics as a career because I loved horror, but I never pursued it. Let's see here. Oh, and he's talking about whatchamacallit. Pinhead apparently is a transsexual, so that's interesting. I did not know that. Bird eaters. When we were talking about the spider eggs, I mean the giant Australian spiders. He said that it was a bird eating spider, which yeah, that is pretty crazy. I think it just meant that it was the size of an Easter egg. Let's see here. Oh, and we're talking about sleep paralysis, and Amar says, wow, did you do any traveling in that state? And he said, for that state, when you stand outside yourself like Doctor Strange did in the first movie, he said, similar to In the Mouth of Madness. Well, for me, I've definitely had dreams where I do traveling, but it's not the sleep paralysis experience is very different from the traveling experience. But the travel experience to me, it feels like it's always been 100% completely like a lucid dream. And I don't necessarily feel like I'm actually traveling through our world. Like I feel like it's all something that's a manufacturing, and that's not to say that people don't actually have experiences where they travel through the astral plane. I'm not discounting that, but it always felt like it was a dream for me where I've definitely had dreams where I'm outside of my body and I can see my body and I'm moving around, but they felt very much like dreams to me where I was lucid as opposed to it being an out of body experience. Um, Gary mentions if you haven't seen it, check out Rosemary's Baby. Great horror movie and not gory at all. I have seen it and it's worth seeing again because it's a classic. I actually saw it in college. I took a film class. It was a survey of horror films, and it was a great class. We got to watch. We started with the old works like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu, which I had never seen before, either of those. By the way, both of those are definitely worth checking out. We got to watch those. Um, we watched Rosemary's Baby, the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We watched. Did we watch The Fly? We definitely watched Dead Ringers. So we watched two Cronenberg films. We watched The Fly and Dead Ringers. Um, and I mean, that actually started my love affair with David Cronenberg because we actually had to read an essay of his that he wrote. And it's from a book called Cronenberg on Cronenberg. And I enjoyed that essay so much, I went out and got the book. And honestly, David Cronenberg, as great a filmmaker he is, he's an amazing writer. Like, I would love to just read just prose written by him because he's a fantastic writer. What else did we see in that film? Believe it or not, we watched 2001, and she made an argument. The instructor, the professor, made an argument about it being an existential horror film. I don't know if I would say that, but I do know that it's hard to stay awake. First off, college kids fall asleep in class all the time. You take a bunch of college kids at a class that runs from 10 a.m. to like 2 p.m. and show them two films in a dark room, you're just gonna have a bunch of college kids just sleeping. So that's usually what happens. She would lecture for a little bit. She'd lecture for a little bit. We'd watch the first film. We'd lecture for a little bit. You know what? I think actually we didn't watch two films per class. I think we just watched one film per class. Because yeah, two films would have been too much. I really enjoyed the class, but that's where I first saw Rosemary's Baby, but definitely worth checking out again. Let's see here. Yeah, Gary says it would be right up my alley, and it definitely was. And Amar well says from the 60s, seen it. Bit slow for me, but interesting. And also says, I've been having lucid dreams since I was a child. Not as much lately, but I've had a lot of dreams where I was flying around saving people. Look at that. Amar the superhero. Says, I used to have those dreams a lot. And he says, yeah, I saw the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie as a kid. Was terrifying. Wow. I watched it in college. Here's the thing. I watched it in college, and even then it was a lot for me. I cannot imagine watching that as a kid. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies never really appealed to me. I haven't gone on to watch the other ones. What else did we watch? Okay, like we watched Vincent Price, House of Wax. That's the kind of like classic, creepy horror films. The Vincent Price stuff. That was good. What else did we watch? I want to say that we watched. We either watched Omega Man or the Vincent Price Last Man on Earth. Now, I want to say we watched Omega Man, which, if you guys don't know, the movie I Am Legend has been made 3 times because they made the Will Smith I Am Legend. Originally, it was then before that they made Charlton Heston made Omega Man, and then before that was The Last Man on Earth. Those 2 previous movies are also adaptations of the Richard Matheson book I Am Legend, or it's a novella really. And the bummer about the Will Smith movie is that it was 2/3 of a great adaptation, because the first 2/3, well, I'd say the first half of the movie clings very closely to the book, and the book is fantastic. But from about halfway to 2/3 on, it veers wildly in its own direction, and it's like they really had a chance to make it. Like, if they'd had the guts to do the ending of the book, it would have been fantastic. And I don't really remember too many details, but the Omega Man ending, I think, is the one that's the closest to the book. All right, enough on the Charlton Heston. Let's see here. Amar says, here, all the time in art history class, that was the most boring class, or it could have been the instructor. It depends on the material. Like, I had a class, I took a medieval art history class, and it was real tough to stay awake, and it was kind of dry and boring. To be honest, the only art history I think that's really interesting is if you're interested in that particular style of art. For instance, if you're really into, like, for me, if it had been I couldn't get into the Renaissance art history class. It was already booked up, and I think that class was usually reserved for people that were in the art history major. So if you were just an art student, you couldn't do that. You would have to double major as art history to take the Renaissance. But that's the thing that people are more interested in, either Renaissance art or contemporary art. And those classes you couldn't take. So I ended up, I took the medieval class. It was okay. I thought it would be interesting. There's a lot of Byzantine art, and it was interesting, but it wasn't anywhere near as interesting as it would have been for Renaissance, because I feel like there's stuff that I'm studying now on my own personal art education, like studying Peter Paul Rubens, studying all the old masters, John Singer Sargent coming much later, but studying Sargent, going back to the old masters, Raphael, like all these different painters and sculptors. I'm reading art books on them. I'm studying on my own, and that stuff is incredibly interesting to me because the books that I've found are really getting into their process. So, all right, let's see. So I'm going to wrap up this last comment here, and then we're going to close it out. Let's see. So Amar also meant, two comments. It's worth saying, Gary. Gary says, "I hope we get a version close to the book someday." Yes, I definitely agree. The book is worth them trying again until they get it right, because it's that good of a story. And like I said, I feel like the Will Smith for the first half was very close. Let's see. And Amar says, "I remember the Vincent Price version, but didn't see the Charlton Heston." No, he says, "I remember the Vincent Price version, but didn't see the Charlton Heston. I don't remember." And he said, "I like the Will Smith version better and agreed that the last part could have been better." The last part spit in the face of the entire point of the book. So that's the thing that bums me out. I think the filmmaker, I believe it's Francis Lawrence, the guy who made Constantine. I believe he was the director. I think he's a great director. I really like his film. In fact, they're making a Constantine sequel, and I hope that he's directing that as well. I like him as a filmmaker. My only problem with that movie was the script and the ending. But you know what? That's my opinion as a fan, because as somebody who actually makes artwork, I understand that there's a whole wide variety of reasons why things may or may not change. I get it. They might have, who knows? I'll bet you they probably tested. They may have shot the real book ending, tested it, and it didn't test well. So people were like, "Oh, it's a downer ending. I don't like this." I mean, you look at something like Fight Club. Fight Club is one of my favorite movies. It's a cult classic. My recollection is that it did not do that well at the box office. I don't know if it was a bomb, but it definitely wasn't the blockbuster that you would think a Brad Pitt, Edward Norton, Helena Bonham Carter film would be. And who knows? If they had made the ending, the true ending of I Am Legend, they might have had a movie that might have had a cult status after it's theatrical, where people would have said, "Oh my God, this is the best movie ever." The type of movie that ends up getting re-released like 10 years later in the theaters because it's a classic. But they may have tested and said, "This movie is not going to be $1 million weekend opening," and that's what the studios are basing their decisions on. They're going to make a film and say, "This is the film that we want to, that they want to make their investment back on. They want to make a profit on their investment. So they may have somebody looked at it and said, well, what ending is going to make the audiences the happiest? And people might walk out of the movie feeling better about it than they would if they'd had the true book ending. But I think I can't fault a studio for wanting to make a profit. At the same time, I think making a better work of art will pay dividends down the road. That's the kind of thing where you end up with a movie that ends up being on a Criterion collection, a movie that's taught in film classes. And I think that's the choice that, I don't know if it's just the studios or it's the producers, all the people involved have to make that decision. And it's a tough decision to make when you're making, because when you're like, if I put myself in the director's position, maybe even he might have wanted to make the original ending. But when you're doing something and you're playing with other people's millions of dollars, you have a responsibility to those people. And, it's the movie business. It's not the movie art gallery. And even art galleries, it's a business. So it's tough. It's tough to say. Yeah, Gary, great point. Says, right, like Blade Runner. It bombed. Now it's Blade Runner. Exactly right. Exactly right. Okay. Oh, yeah. Also, The Thing. The Thing bombed. Also with a downer ending. And that's the real challenge there, is making something and having the guts to make it with a downer ending, knowing that people may not love it at the box office. And I think it's hard for a studio to get behind that. Not that, let me put it this way. I think that a studio, like let's say the head of the studio or the head of the marketing department or whatever the executives that greenlit a movie, I think that they might go into the movie wanting to make an ending that is true to the book. And then they go through what they do with all these movies where they test them. And that testing process, it depends on what part of the country they test it in, depends on the age group that they get in. They might get people in who aren't necessarily the demographic to see that film. You might just get people who happen to be walking by. Those people when you're walking by the movie theater, they're handing out the passes for a free screening. It might not be the type of movie that these people want to see at all. But there's like, oh, free movie, I'll go see it. And maybe they go see a romantic comedy when there's somebody who likes like hardcore, like First Blood, action, gritty films, and they give the movie a horrible rating. Maybe it's something where there's somebody who likes romantic comedies and it is like Scanners Part 8, There's all kinds of reasons why it may or may not work, where they may get bad reviews, or they just say that this movie is not going to perform well with the ending that they gave it. In which case the executive is like, it's my job to make the studio money. So they change the ending. I can't fault them for that. But I mean, that's part of the reasons why I'm an independent creator, is because I want to make the thing I want to make first and foremost. And I think it takes guts to say, I'm going to make my decisions based on what is going to be the most creative versus what is going to make the most money. I think it's a trade-off. I don't have any good answers. I don't envy people that are in that position, and I don't envy myself. I'm sure there's going to be points where I'm going to have to make a creative decision and decide. I mean, that's not even true. I've already made decisions where I've changed the way I'm doing artwork specifically. I mean, this piece. Do you guys want to know why I'm doing this piece? I am doing this piece because, where is it? Let me find the actual image. Go out, zoom out. Where is it? Is it on here? Okay. So this image, this piece has like 1 million views. There's a work in progress animated GIF of me actually making this horse. This piece has like 6 million views on Pinterest. I don't know why people love this image. It's not even a good, as you can see, compared to how I draw, it's not my best drawing. But people seem to love this piece. So I thought, I should make a t-shirt out of this. So that this piece is a response. So this image here of me doing it is my response to, oh, the audience seems to like something. I'm going to make artwork to capitalize on what they seem to like. So I'm doing the same thing that, we may criticize some filmmakers about doing. I think that this piece that I've drawn is significantly better than the original one that I did, But another thing, the reason why I have that original image on in my photos is because I'm going to do a draw over of that piece and make another one where this is the one that I think this is the best possible version of it. But I'm going to do a draw over where all I do is just fix what's crappy about the other one. So I know I said I was going to wrap up a few minutes ago. I got on that rant. We were talking about, film and profit. Amar says right here, make art or make money for the awards, or make art for the awards or money for the profit. He says that's why actors want an award when they make art. He says, I'll take the money. You can give everyone else the award. Well, here's the thing, Amar. If it's just about making money, why make art? Why not go into banking? Why not go into finance? That's the challenge. There is there are much better ways to make money than making comics or animated film. I mean, hell, if you wanted to do something creative, it makes more sense to go into Hollywood to become a studio executive. That way you can make really good money and be involved in creative arts. Instead of trying to sell your work to a studio, it makes more sense to just go work at the studio and bank a huge paycheck and just tell the creative people to. In fact, that's an interesting thing. I know that your idea is to create an intellectual property, make some animated films, make some comics, and sell that IP or license that IP to Netflix or Amazon or some other studio. Why not pursue just working at a studio, and then you decide what products you want, what IP you want the studio to purchase or license, and give them creative notes, tell them, well, change this, change that, do this and that, and just be the boss and have a huge bankroll. Why be involved in making the actual thing at all? Point is that there's much better ways to make money than doing what we do. So that said, I mean, for me, the only reason for making any profit at all is because making the money allows me to continue to make more things. But for me, the reward is the making of the art. Now, I don't say that I criticize people who are making art specifically motivated by the finance and the money. I believe that that's the smart move, is to make things that are going to sell. And like me, I'm doing it right now with this horse. I've already just admitted to you, I'm only making this piece in response to people saying that they look like that they really like something of mine. So I'm making another version of it to sell. So I'm doing the exact same thing. So I'd be a hypocrite to say that I'm criticizing it. That said, my larger point in this, I guess, is oh shit! I just realized these eyes are on top, but I'm gonna have to put a layer underneath to put the snake put the red under the snake underbelly. My larger point is there's just better ways to make money than doing this. So if the only goal is money, and become a creative exec. I mean, you could become a creative executive or a game producer at a video game studio where you're not actually making the game. You're just hiring the people to do it and telling them what to do. People still have gigs like that, and they make, I think, the people working internally, I think, make a lot more money than the people making whatever the creative thing is. So there's pursuing studio jobs, or if you're not pursuing something creative, then it's working in finance, working in the corporate world, going into corporate law, where all you do is write contracts all day. It might not be exciting, but it's definitely a much easier way to make a whole lot more money. And I've even thought, I don't think I could stomach this kind of life, but if I had come out of college, let's say I had gone to law school and I'd specifically studied corporate law, learned how to write contracts, was making multiple 6-7 figure salary, like doing that from like 20 to 30, and then make enough money that I could retire and then spend the rest of my life just making art. That might even be a worthy trade-off. To spend 10 years, to sell 10 years of my soul so I can spend the rest of my life just making art. It's a reasonable trade-off. I didn't make that trade-off. Being older now, I still don't think I would make that same trade-off. But being older, I look at it and I don't think it's unreasonable. I didn't do it and I still wouldn't do it, but I can't say it's a bad deal. It's just a different path. I don't know. Amar says, "Don't worry about it. It's in our nature to be hypocritical. We just don't like to admit it." I will admit it. I got some hypocrisy. I got some in me. I'm not gonna shy away from that. But thank you. All right. Let's see here. Yeah, Gary says, and the studio famously leaned on Lucas the whole time he was working on Star Wars because they thought it would bomb. You can't predict this stuff. You have to just try and make something good. And that's the thing. For me, more often than not, it's not about trying to make something that's sellable. I'm trying to make something good because you can make something that, in fact, that's another thing that I've heard and listen to people talking about screenwriting is you can try to make something that pleases the audience and it still doesn't please the audience. Then you have a piece of work that didn't sell and you don't care about. So the argument, I can't remember who it was, but the argument the screenwriter, I think in the interview made was you might as well try to make something that you think is good because you can't predict whether it will or won't resonate. But let's see. Amar says 6 million views. That's nice. You have to plug into that more. Well, yeah, I definitely do. I'm going to use the same hashtags I used in the original one. I'll post a video of it, and I'll just make sure it links to the shirts and the prints that I'm going to make based on this one. And Amar says, well, now that's what I really want to do is be a producer. He said more so than being the grunt person doing the art. I definitely agree with that. He says, I am wanting to tell my stories more than the art. Let me see. All right, there we go. We're all caught up. All right, seriously, wrapping it up now. All right, guys. Again, thank you so much, as always, for the great conversation, the great company, the great feedback. I'll definitely keep you guys posted when I have this piece finished because I'm pretty sure I'm going to finish it this week. 90% sure. We'll see. But I'll have to get the shirts and the prints made, see how those look. But in the meantime, if you would like to get bonus live streams twice a month, whereas these are usually an hour, a little bit longer sometimes, we have this thing I call Art Book Study Group where we do it twice a month. We do 2.5, 3 hour long live streams where we dig into some of the best art books around. I also have an online digital archive that you can access where you can read all of my comic books. We have a Patreon exclusive Discord server where we share artwork, feedback, tools, process, tips, and more. You can get access to all of that for as little as $2 a month. There are higher tiers for additional reward, or if you just want to support and support the work that we're doing here. You get all of that at patreon.com/Jeremy. That's patreon.com/GERIMI. You can pick up a free digital sketchbook by signing up for my free monthly newsletter. I also share work in progress animated GIFs, blog posts about what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what's inspiring me creatively. Head on over to newsletter.jeremy.net to sign up for that. Get that free digital sketchbook and the newsletter. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Comixology or Kindle, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, I Had the Gods, which is a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. You can pick up my most recent comic book, Morning Star. It is Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western. It's an 8-issue series. Volume 1 contains issues 1 through 4. Volume 2 contains issues 5 through 8. Both volumes have extensive back matter, photo reference and how I use it, character sketches, character designs, page layouts, script excerpts, and more. Check out all of that at amazon.jeremy.net, and that's amazon.gerimi.net. If you're watching on other platforms, on the YouTube page, there are book flip-throughs for all those books. If you're watching on Twitch, if you go to the About tab on the channel, you can check out links to all of these and more. All right, guys, again, thank you so much for all the great feedback, all the great comments. Well, last thing here, Amar says, it looks like you get a lot of views on Pinterest. I want to see you can try to convert that to audience. Good luck. I hope so. We'll see how it goes. All right, guys, that's it for now. Go be creative.